When I was young, my papa, my grandfather, used to call me Mongibay. It was his mother's name. You see, his parents both died, and he was orphaned at 2 years old. When I was growing up, he would say that I was his mother's soul, come back to spend time with him. We were really close. He lived with us and would often take me by bus to the nearby mall, and he would buy me not one, not two, but a whole box of donuts. The ones with the sprinkles on top, I'm sure to the dismay of my parents. In his more sentimental moments, he would ask me to cook for him, to make him his favorite dish. It's called khichdi. But I was a kid and I was occupied with playing and running and reading, and I had no interest in being in the kitchen, except when my mom or my grandmother would ask for help. When I was 13, Papa had stomach pains that wouldn't go away. We took him to the hospital, and he never came home. I remember visiting him in the ICU, leaning down and whispering in his ear, "I'm sorry, Papa. I never made you khichdi." I whispered because I didn't want anyone else to hear. And I didn't tell that story for many years. In fact, even now, I only remember telling it a handful of times, probably to my therapist, because I felt so bad about it. Looking back as an adult, I can remind myself that I was only 13. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I didn't know how to cook, and I certainly didn't know that I was going to run out of time with him. Back then, I just figured he would be there with me forever. I took time as a given, and while I try not to take anything as a given anymore, there are times when I still do. I feel like I have more time to do the things that I want to do, more time to see the people that I want to see, more time to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. And hopefully I do have much more time. But I don't want to take it as a given. We have a tendency to do that sometimes, don't we? I'll visit later, I'll call tomorrow, I'll spend the time after this busy phase of life. These things that we may or may not recognize as important, but that don't feel urgent, they get postponed. And instead, we prioritize the things that are urgent, but maybe not as important. A meeting, cleaning, running errands. What happens when you run out of time? What becomes more important and also now urgent? Welcome to the XO Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Rishma Walji. I was a clinician and an academic, and now I'm a scientific creative. I help people approach life more proactively rather than reactively. I'm all about personal growth, being intentional, and living a life that feels extraordinary. You can find lots of resources on my website, livingxo.com, including free workshops and a free quiz that can help you figure out how deliberate you are in your own life, with guided steps to help you make more intentional decisions. Today, I'm chatting with my friend, Dr. Jacqueline Huey. She's a palliative care physician and associate professor.
So I'm Dr. Jacqueline Huey. I am a palliative care physician, and I've been practicing close to 20 years now. And most of my work has been in acute care, but I also do some community care as well. And I'm also teaching, and most of my teaching is in palliative care as well.
Palliative care is specialized medical care for people living with serious illness. This type of care is focused on providing relief from the symptoms and stress of illness, so the goal is to improve the quality of life for both the patient and the family. And often it's provided for patients at the end of life. So she spends her time with people who have a very different perspective on life.
The experience of having conversations with patients, and what are those conversations? And they're very intimate conversations. So they're usually conversations that other professionals don't even get a chance to have. And some of these conversations are so personal difficult to chat about even with their own family and their best friends and loved ones. Not easy to share about how you feel about dying. I feel like it's a privilege just to be at the bedside and just to listen and really listen intently.
Jackie told me that usually patients are sharing about their life. It's a review of their life. And sometimes it's about things that were great, and sometimes it's about things that they regret.
Usually, patients that have very few regrets actually, I would say, have a smoother death because they've lived life. They feel like, sometimes they want more of it and they weren't given that opportunity, but they feel like they've lived as best they could. And although time is short for them, they don't look back and say, I wish this and this and this and this. But often people with big regrets, whether it's relationships, haven't done this or enough. Usually it's around relationships. Those patients sometimes have a harder death because they want more time to rectify, or they're living with that suffering. They haven't really made peace with it, maybe.
What do you mean by it's a harder death? Is it like more emotional?
I think acceptance of the dying, of the dying process, of you dying, makes it a little easier. When it comes to symptoms, when it comes to emotional suffering, spiritual suffering. So it's beyond just physical suffering.
Jackie recounted an experience with someone who impacted her deeply. It was one of her first patients when she was a fellow.
So when I was training in palliative care,
It was a lady in her 60s who had just retired, and she asks Jackie very frankly, "How much time do I have?"
months maybe, it was a very hard conversation. But what I think was hardest is at one point she just stopped. She wasn't interested in more medical information. And she just said to me, I just retired a few weeks ago. They even threw me a party. I was supposed to start living. I was supposed to start traveling and enjoying. I remember this so clearly. And she looked straight into my eyes. And I was just a young resident still and said, don't ever do that. Don't wait. And, that's just one example of many where I'm forced to look at my own choices in life. So I think these patients have taught me more than than I sometimes even recognize. They teach me how to live and to not be really caught up because life is so unpredictable. It could be taken away anytime. I've had very young patients as well in their early 20s, and it's never easy, but it just becomes harder. As I think when there's so much opportunity in life still, and it's cut so short.
Professionally and also personally, I've been around chronic illness, pain, and death. And patients often ask me, what do I say? What can I do? I don't think there's really anything you can say to make someone feel better in that circumstance. You can't change it or take away the pain, but you can be there for them, supporting them in whatever they need, in whatever way they need, whether it's holding their hand, listening, helping with chores, etc. So I asked Jackie her perspective as a health provider at the bedside of her patients. This is something she sees almost every day.
I'll start with what do I say? And mostly it's just, again, really active listening. And I think they want someone to share this with, right? And so I always tend to just acknowledge that thank you for sharing with me. I know this is not easy, right? So I tend to reflect on that before I go home. And when I go home, maybe, but try to park it. Like that, these are very hard conversations so that there is a bit of compartmentalization just with the work that we do, but it does influence you. And it reminds me not to get so caught up in the day to day things that easy to be frustrated about. Someone just cut you off, while you're driving, or your son lied to you about your homework, his homework, right? That's life. It is hard, but in the context of truly living and making the most of what we have today. It's really remembering and reflecting on what is this all about. And I don't think we have that space and time often to do that because of our culture, how much we work and how much we do. We're a doing society.
So often we're concerned with productivity. We need to do more, work harder, move faster. But growth can come in different ways. And sometimes taking time off, slowing down, taking some time for ourselves is actually the best action we can take. We talked about what's really important in life. And I think it's hard as someone who is living each day thinking that we have more days because we have longer term goals and dreams. So even if we think our families are more important than work, we spend our time working to try to provide for our families, or to help others, or to create something meaningful in society, or to employ people. If we want to have far reaching impact, it's sometimes hard to juggle our days so that we're not just focusing on what's urgent, but also what's important before time passes us by.
No one dies being remembered for usually the work that they do. It's not on their obituary. What a great worker, 80 hours a week. It's not what people are remembered for. So I always want to highlight that when people say, what about work? I said, what about work? This is how much time you've got. What's important to you? There is one patient who I still remember very vividly as well, where work was important, but in a very different way. He was a mentor. He asked me if he could work as much as he could. And I was really curious about that. I said, most people don't want to work till they die. So what was important? Why was it so important for him? And for him, it was because he mentored these young colleagues. He saw himself as a mentor. So he was writing letters to them. And that was so moving. And he was on his laptop working away. And he'd be like, okay, let's just make this efficient so I can get back to my letters. But he had a legacy to pass on.
The idea of leaving a legacy is another important thing that people bring up to Jackie. They want to be remembered for something.
And perhaps that's what makes it easier if you've already done that, whether, the connections you've made in life. But when people feel like something's missing or something's disrupted or something's not complete, dying sometimes can be a bit harder.
This is where I wonder, how do we bridge the gap between feeling more at peace with your life versus being in the grind and being pulled along with the momentum from day to day?
I think if I could distill it down, and there's been some research on this, looking at, is it religion? Is it accomplishments and so on? But it boils down to connections and the community that you have. And so if we take all these lessons learned from so many patients that we've seen, not just myself in palliative care, we all know that it boils down to really having these deep connections and feeling supported and loved. And if we spend more of our time doing that instead of focusing on the other little things in life, seemingly large at the time, but really it is, people are usually remembered for being a great friend, father, mother, person. So I think we can take a lot away with just that.
People don't tend to wish I spent more hours on paperwork, or I wish I spent time on my phone. Although, of course, we get bogged down by those things in everyday life. Think about it for yourself. What do you want to spend more time doing? Here's what Jackie sees most often.
A lot of it's travel. And people wish they've just experienced more. I wish I traveled. And some people get to live it out. And even if they're really sick, and some people never had that opportunity. Yeah, I think experience is usually a big one on people's list of to do. Wait till after retirement. Wait till the kids are grown up. Wait till we've paid off our mortgage. All important things, but it does take away from living in the present.
I remember this one. My grandparents used to say the same thing. They worked so hard to provide a stable life for their future children and grandchildren. And then when the time came when they were able to travel and have experiences, they didn't have their health or even the strength to lift their suitcases. They had a hard life, and they kept telling us, live, live now. You never know what will happen tomorrow. It's not easy to live in the present moment when you have responsibilities and obligations, but it's a good reminder to really pay attention to how life is unfolding and what direction you want to go in.
I'm just like everyone else too. I get caught up, right? And I am so appreciative when patients have these chats with me, their life reviews, these serious conversations. And I'm always coming out richer and more mindful of what I do have. So it has made me grateful. I am pretty, I'm a physician, so pretty high strung, but I do think it's made me calmer and more reflective. I really am trying my hardest to live in the present. And I teach that as well for my residents who there's always the next step, especially in medicine, there's always something more. Getting into medicine, getting into your residency program, getting the specialty, getting the perfect practice. And then, what other accolades and what other achievements and can you do? And it seems a little endless. But trying to enjoy the journey and just being grateful. And if your life ended today, would you be okay with that? Would you have felt that it was a good life? I did my best. I have great connections. I will be remembered. Mm-hmm. So I think it's made me more of that. I'm as imperfect as everyone else. And I think there's an element of reflection there that I come home with usually.
Yeah. How do you separate? I mean, this is maybe going off tangent, but when I was in practice, I dealt with a lot of emotional things as well. Like women would have miscarriages or, like there was all these things that I had to develop strategies to sort of be grateful to be there and be part of that person who can be there for her and have her talk to me about it, but then also to separate it at the end of the day, because having those serious conversations are so valuable, but at the same time, it's heavy.
Yeah, for sure. And if we think about the stages of grief, they're all emotional heaviness until you get to acceptance. And even during acceptance, it's heavy. So anger, denial, all of it is heavy. You can never truly separate because it is a part of you, but there is, I think, some strategies where you do try to leave it behind. And one of the ways that I teach my residents sometimes, something very simple, even pre-COVID, we were always using alcohol in the hospitals and is a way to obviously sterilize. But to me, it's also a bit of washing, like resetting. So between patients, I want to give my next patient my all. So my last patient, we had hard conversations, difficulty, accepting death or just having hard conversation. I use that alcohol wash in between to reset, to breathe, and to start again. We also did something at my workplace because we recognized we just had a period of a lot of younger patients maybe and having a hard time, young moms, so on. And so we were, I think, carrying home a lot of that heaviness. And so to your point, like what were we doing about it? And we were finding it helpful to talk about it, of course, but we also physically created something. We together, as one of our team building activities, we built this, we went to a glass blowing place and we created these pendants and we wear them with our name tags. We hang them. And then at the end of the day, we put it back in a little box. And when we start our day, we bring it with us. So it's very physical as a reminder to try to keep it a little bit compartmentalized because we fully we can't fully at times. But as a way of letting go and to give. Now I'm going home for my family, for the people that matter to me. So that's just a strategy that we've come up at work, and I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We have so many strategies too for boundary building, and I had a very similar one to your alcohol sterilization, where I had a sink outside of my actual treatment room. So I would go and I'd obviously have to wash my hands in between every patient and many, many times during the day. But somehow it turned into a ritual where I would go there and just take a deep breath and wash, and then that would be like my way of cleansing my physical body, but also my emotional space so that I could be present for the next person. So it's very similar to what you're
Yeah,
doing.
no, and I really wish we could teach that more, right? Just those little spaces make such a difference. I know you're probably feeling the same way, Rishma.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
After talking about the patient experience and the healthcare provider experience, what about the family experience? Jackie said it's always hard for the family, not just the personal emotions, but also the family dynamics. And then you add that to another dimension like COVID, and it changes the process in a difficult way. It has to be a lonely experience for patients when they're not able to interact with family members or have visiting hours.
Yeah, not having your supports around has, I think, made dying from COVID experience very difficult. And I would say a lot of family have probably complicated grief from those experiences, not being able to say goodbye, not being there, knowing that they couldn't breathe, they were suffering, all of that, for sure. It has been challenging on so many fronts. A lot of these patients are also on a lot of oxygen. So, just remembering our last few patients having conversations about coming off oxygen and what does that feel like for a family member to make that decision when they can't be around, trusting the healthcare professionals to do the best for their family, and trusting that, that they will die peacefully.
Jackie brought up an interesting point about fighting for life. She said that there's this perception that we need to fight, always fight until the end. But it's not right for everyone.
My loved one has always been a fighter. We hear that all the time about being a fighter. And someone might have a other different perspective, right, in the family, including the patient, saying, it's been hard. I've suffered many years already or for a while, and it's not really what I want. I'm in a lot of pain or suffering, and I don't want to keep living like this. I don't have the quality of life that I need to keep living.
She said something that I thought was profound, that we don't talk about the fact that we all die. In her work, it's more immediate and there's an understood timeline, but there's still this perception that we have to fight until the end.
I'm a fighter. I never quit. And then it creates a lot of losers because death is inevitable and we don't talk about it. So if you don't fight death, you're a loser. And we're just hoping to change that mindset, right? To say that this is part of life, and not fighting it doesn't mean you're not a fighter. What are you fighting for? Quality of life, time with family.
Yeah, there's no winning or losing in that battle. It's not a race or competition. Like there are parts of life that you just can't win, and I think there's this tendency, obviously, to try to do it the best we possibly can, like be the best at, handling pain or whatever it is.
And I think the way we've marketed a lot of these foundations have marketed it that way. So let's beat cancer, conquer kidney disease. We can fight this, right? And so that marketing creates a bit of a war cry, which makes it a battle, which make you're a participant. So which side are you on?
Yeah, for sure. I can see how it's hard to let go. You maybe need that mentality if you're likely to get past it, and you need that motivation or that energy or that drive. But then if you're going down a different path and you're headed more to palliative care, then it's a harder thing to hold on to.
Yeah. That transition point is hard. And for some people, they can, and they can see, okay, I've done everything. I've gone through chemotherapy treatment, all that hard stuff I've done. But if it's not working, can I accept what's coming next?
So let's transition this conversation a bit to what we can learn from this. I asked Jackie, although she's human and may not be perfect at it either, what has she learned from working in this field? What can she share that she's trying to be mindful of in her own life?
That's a very good question. I think early days, I just talked a lot. A lot of what we do in medicine and in other health professionals is we information share and we just talk. And I've learned to really sit and listen. And in listening, you really get everything you need anyway. And you get so much more. And just be open and curious and listen. So that is definitely my learning over the years, is to learning to just shut up more and listen. And I've carried that probably to my kids as well, where instead of lecturing, listening. And a lot of us in palliative care, we often get the, oh, you're in palliative care, that's so sad. And many of us have the same response. It is and it isn't. It is really one of the, I wouldn't do anything differently. What a privilege it is to be part of that journey and to share the most intimate with someone.
What a great lesson to learn in life too, to listen more, because wouldn't that just solidify so many relationships and help so many communication, problems between people, and if we could all listen a little bit better, then that would connect us together. My mom used to volunteer for funerals to help with the transition, and she said the very same thing. She was like, what a privilege, and also she found it an honor to be able to help people through that, I guess, passage. The passage, she found it very moving and touching, and she felt so much peace from that, being able to be there for people. So I've heard that before.
Yeah. And it is to be part of all that journey, right? Like the grief after.
Jackie also talked about learning to be present through negative emotions. She said she gets a lot of anger in her job, and sometimes it can be challenging.
I think anger always stems from something. So whether it's fatigue or distrust or feeling out of control, so many things lead to anger. But I'm feeling there's more anger in our workspace as well. And it is very hard to deal with. That's one of the things that really strikes me personally as well. And I'm a natural pleaser, so hard to deal with anger. And we've been seeing more of it. Sometimes I can't dissipate it. And sometimes I just sit with it, knowing that sometimes the anger is directed at me, sometimes not. And sometimes mostly directed at the situation. But I'm there and I'm present. So I will be facing it, the fury, right? So, but learning to again be compassionate and say, I know it's not me. I know it's a situation. It might be some of me. What can I do better? But sitting with that and saying, they must be suffering. And I think there's always a bit of space to do that too.
You must be good at handling teen hormones.
Don't ask my kids that question.
The anger is not me.
Oh, I get angry too. But I think it's I think it's how you respond. It's how to not escalate. That's taken me a long time.
Oh, it's such a different world when you're working and you have to be this professional person, and then you go home and you have to be yourself. It's a different world.
For sure. 100%. And We got to be careful too, just that balance, right? Because sometimes you give it all of you at work. So when you come home, there's nothing left. So that active listening is work. So you don't have it anymore. And you can't listen to the grumbling, the fights, and everything that happens in a normal household. And so that is hard too. Like I know you're doing it too, Rishma. Like sometimes you just have to close the door and say, got to reset. This is my new space.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what can I give in this new space? And sometimes not very much, right?
Sometimes not very much. This is where I'm starting to figure out how to juggle, how much I give to others and how much I can give to myself, and how to balance that. That's the whole. Maybe it's just the stage of life that I'm in right now, where I feel like I did a good job at work. I want to be a good mom, but I'm starting to feel like I need my identity back. I need my whatever is good for me back so that I can grow and age in a healthy way. So it's the juggle and the balance of trying to move past that in a healthier, more stable way.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. And I think it'll be a lifelong journey. And I've come to this. This is my aging. That is life. That's okay. That's my journey of trying to find a balance that will never be balanced, perhaps. But and I'm not going to beat myself up. There's no guilt, right? It's just my journey.
Yeah, it's constantly evolving, and that's okay.
That's okay.
None of us knows how much time we have, but what could we think about right now? Maybe we have 20 years, maybe it's going to be 1 year. We don't know where our lives are headed. Is there something that you try to remind yourself of on a regular basis?
I would say be present. Really be present in everything you do. And I have a lot of shortcomings with this, but when my son says, watch me, and I'm like on the computer, like, that was great. I'm really trying to say, I'm only going to have this moment once. So embrace it all. And me watching him, that few seconds makes him feel great, feels connected. And and I think that's what builds those connections, right?
I'm trying to be present too. Sometimes it's so hard, but I'm always glad when I do it.
I'm not waiting. I'm probably not waiting. Like if I see an opportunity, I'm not waiting for my bank account to look better. I'm just doing it. And that might not be the case for everyone. I think we're in a place that we can do that. But at the same time, sometimes I make decisions where no, I actually think I have an opportunity. My kids are with me young once. I'm going to do it. I'm not waiting until I'm 65. So I'm not seeing, I think, retirement the way our parents have seen it. I've seen too many people regret that. I was supposed to blank after retirement. That's not my playbook anymore. I'm not even thinking about retirement as an age. It's when I want to wind down and when it's not giving me as much meaning, or I'm not able to for whatever reason. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm not going to say at 55, at 75, that's my cutoff.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Just do it. Amazing.
Just do it. Yeah.
This was one of those episodes that resonated with me so deeply, both personally and professionally. I was fortunate to have a big extended family, and that also means I had many people to lose. Over the years, I've experienced many of my loved ones pass on. Perhaps it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about living my best life, because I was so acutely aware at a very young age how precious and unpredictable our time here is. It would mean a lot to me to hear your stories about life, love, loss. You can let me know anything you've learned along the way, or if anything from this episode stuck with you. I would love to hear from you. You can email me directly at hello@livingxo.com. Stay tuned in the next few weeks. We have some really great episodes coming up about dealing with trauma and grief. And not all the episodes are heavy. We have some really inspiring conversations too. One of them with a gold medalist. She is really amazing. And I'm working on one about friendships and another one on creativity. If you have any topic requests, please reach out. Don't forget to subscribe so you can get all the new episodes, and please take a moment to write a review on iTunes. If you're working on living your own XO life, take my free quiz to figure out how you approach being intentional in your life and how you can be even more deliberate with your decisions. livingxo.com/quiz. Thank you so much. Until next time.